I used to know the rhythm of our evenings by the sound of her keys. A metallic chime at 7:42, the soft thud of the door, the breath she'd release like she was setting down a day she didn't want to carry anymore. Then it shifted. The keys came later, sometimes not at all, and when they did, the breath never came. Just a careful silence, like she'd rehearsed how to be quiet inside our home. Empty dinners started as a joke between us. "We're turning into those people," she laughed once, half-hearted, setting her bag on the counter while the steam from the rice rose between us. But the jokes dried up. I'd keep her plate warm in the oven until the oven's tiny red light felt like a heartbeat in a dark room. She'd text, "Don't wait up, work ran late." The first night she said it, I took a fork to her plate and ate in small, guilty bites as if I was stealing. By the fourth, I just placed her plate in the fridge, covered, labeled S, like I was organizing grief with plastic wrap. The apartment seemed bigger in those weeks. The couch had an extra cushion of space where she didn't sit. The TV asked me if I was still watching, the screen turning dim, reflective. There I was, a ghost at the edge of my own life, framed by the thin silver of our wedding photo. Her smile in that picture was wide and unafraid, her hair caught in the wind. I used to think that picture felt like a beginning. Now it felt like a story I'd borrowed and forgotten to return. She began to smell like outside. Not the rain, not the city. Something warmer, unfamiliar, a cologne I couldn't name. She'd drift past me, eyes tired, fingers cold, hugging herself like she was protecting something I couldn't see. Conversations shrank. We traded functional words in the kitchen like coupons, milk, rent, meeting, later. She would touch her phone more than she touched me. The blue glow under her chin made her look like someone underwater. It wasn't one thing that broke me. It was the accumulation of small, patient betrayals, the late meetings that never lined up, the way she smiled at something on her phone, not at me, the way she pulled away when I reached, not with anger, but with that gentle cruelty people reserve for doors they don't want to close loudly. I told myself it was stress. I told myself she needed space. I told myself love survives these little winters if you keep the kettle on and the lights low. Rain came one Thursday, thin and constant, needling the windows like it wanted to come in. I brewed coffee even though it was close to midnight, set a cup for her at her place out of habit. I stood there listening to the city hum through the storm, the soft electric hiss of the fridge, my own breath steady and shallow. I walked to the bedroom and opened the top drawer of her nightstand, looking for a charger. There was a receipt, folded twice, pressed flat as if it were something precious. A restaurant I didn't recognize. 2 glasses of wine, steak medium rare. She was a vegetarian when we met. A dessert I know she hated because it was too sweet. A date circled in ink that wasn't ours. A time that aligned with one of her late nights. And a note on the back, written in a hand I'd never seen. Next time, no leaving early. For a minute, the room felt wrong, as if the walls had leaned in. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed the receipt like it could be unwrinkled enough to make sense. My phone buzzed on the dresser. Her message was simple: rain is insane. Stay warm. I stared at it long enough for the text to fade into the background of the lock screen. Then I placed the receipt back exactly where I found it, like you do with something sharp you're not ready to handle. The next afternoon, I left work early. I told myself I wanted to cook her dinner. I told myself I wanted to be the version of me that still surprises her. I chopped garlic, too much of it, because I needed something to fill the air. The door opened while the pan hissed. She stepped in, hair wet, cheeks flushed from the cold, and for a second she looked like my wife again. "Smells good," she said, a smile blooming and dying in the same moment. She touched my shoulder. Her fingers lingered. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and my voice sounded like it came from the other room. She went to change. I stood at the sink and watched the rain stripe the window like scratches. When she returned, she wore the sweater I bought her last winter. She sat, folded her hands, and said, "We should talk," and my hands remembered the receipt before my mind did. There are talks you can predict: money, schedules, in-laws. This one was a cliff edge you walk toward without knowing you're already falling. She didn't lie. She didn't confess, either. She hovered between the two like she was crossing a river on stones she'd memorized. "I've been unhappy," she said softly, folding and unfolding a napkin. "I don't feel like myself. I don't want to hurt you." I asked questions carefully, like I was diffusing something. She kept her eyes down. The silence between sentences landed like plates being set gently on a table that would never be laid again. "Are you seeing someone?" I asked. The room held its breath. She blinked, a slow-motion grief. "I didn't plan it," she said. "It just happened." Who? The word tasted like metal. "A friend," she said. "From the firm, it's not serious." The laugh that escaped me was quiet and ugly. "Receipts usually are," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flinched, then steadied. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if that could soften the edges. "I don't know what I'm doing. I thought maybe I needed to feel something again." I nodded. I stared at her plate. I imagined the oven light again, the little red dot. Do you love him? I asked and wished I hadn't. She looked at me then, really looked, a storm at the edges. I don't know, she said. I don't think so. She stood to clear the plates that had barely been touched. Her ring made a small sound against the ceramic, a clink like a door not quite shut. She turned her back to me and exhaled. I need some time, she said, and that was the moment I understood that people don't leave loudly. They slip away in polite phrases. They close cabinets softly. They ask for time like they're borrowing sugar. That night she slept on her side of the bed, facing the window. I watched the blur of streetlights slide over her shoulders. I counted her breaths until I couldn't. In the morning she left early, a note by the coffee machine, back late. Don't wait up. I folded the note 4 times until it was the size of my thumbnail. I placed it in my pocket and went to work, the world too bright, the air too thin. By lunch I'd forgotten to eat. By evening I couldn't remember if I'd spoken to anyone. I came home to an apartment that smelled like garlic and rain and the familiar absence of her. I stood by the window, phone cold in my hand, and typed a message I deleted 3 times. Finally I wrote, "Is there anything you want me to know?" I didn't send it. I waited in the gray light until the city darkened and the hallway outside filled with strangers' footsteps. The lock turned at 11:16. She stepped in, hair dry this time, eyes guarded, and in her hesitation, in the way her hand hovered over the ring at her finger as if it didn't belong there, I understood that she had been with him. She looked at me and tried to smile. I looked back and didn't. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, the words evaporating in the warm kitchen air. In that quiet, in the small space between us, something ended without saying goodbye. And when she finally did speak, very softly, it was only my name, like a question she couldn't ask. Sleep became a place I visited but couldn't live in. I'd lie down and watch the ceiling like it might confess something. The fan traced slow circles, the room breathed, and every time a car passed outside, light swung across the wall like a lighthouse that never found me. I learned the weight of 3:07 a.m., the way it presses the chest. I learned the particular nausea of watching the clock advance, unkind and indifferent, while the mind lists all the things it almost said. Her side of the bed grew neat, too neat, corners sharp, pillow untouched, the imprint of her missing more visible than any pattern in the fabric. She started staying at her sister's on and off, a phrase that disguised a steady absence. Some nights she came back, quiet, apologetic in gestures more than words, washing a mug, folding a blanket, setting a glass of water on my nightstand like a peace offering. Other nights she texted from far away, "Don't wait up." The syllables of that message turned into scripture I recited under my breath. I found traces without looking for them. A faint cologne that wasn't mine in the elevator, timed too perfectly to her schedule to be coincidence. A new playlist on her phone, named simply Drive, the kind of name you give something you don't want to explain. A sweater that didn't match her usual taste, soft as regret, left on the back of the dining chair. I picked it up, held it, then put it back exactly, as if arranging evidence for an invisible trial. Friends reached out, faintly aware of the storm. "You two okay?" They asked in that way people ask when they don't want the truth but hope for it anyway. I said, "We're figuring things out." The phrase felt like a bridge to nowhere. I stopped answering group chats. I put my phone face down and learned how loud silence can be when it sits next to you on the couch. The apartment held 1,000 versions of us. The chipped corner of the coffee table where we'd banged into it, carrying a box on our first day. The water ring under the plant she overwatered because she felt bad for it. The map of the city we'd pinned, little red dots marking restaurants we loved. I stood in front of that map one night and pulled out the pins, one by one, until the corkboard was perforated and empty, an outline of a life with holes. He had a name finally, not from her, from a mutual colleague. Max, short, efficient. It didn't fit what I imagined. I pictured a man with a careful smile, easy shoulders, a watch he didn't check often because time bent toward him anyway. I imagined how he laughed, how she angled toward the sound, how her hand might lift to tuck her hair when she was nervous. I invented 100 small moments and they all hurt. The turning point came quietly. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a dramatic ask or a slammed door. It was a morning painted with the thin light of February, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory. I poured coffee into a mug that said "maybe later," an old joke she'd bought me on a whim. The handle had a crack. I ran a thumb along it. She walked in, hair pulled back, no makeup, the version of her I loved most. She stood by the window and watched the city wake. "I met him at lunch," she said, the words placed carefully like breakable things. I waited. "I told him I needed time," she said. "I told him I was married." She didn't say the past tense of that word, but I felt it in the pause. "He said he understood." I wanted to ask what there was to understand. Instead, I asked, "Do you want to be with him?" She flinched like I'd startled her. I don't know, she said again, and the repetition stung more this time, like a refusal to take the test. I'm sorry, she added. Her voice had that softness people use when they put a blanket over something they broke. I looked at her and saw not a villain but a person standing in a mistake too large for the room. I thought of our first apartment, the cheap string lights, the way we ate takeout on the floor because we didn't own a table yet. I wanted to ask if she remembered the sound of the rain on that first night. I wanted to remind her who she'd been. Instead, I said, I'm going to be okay. The words felt like pebbles dropped in water, small, rippling. I didn't entirely believe them, but they sounded right in the air between us. She cried then quietly, trying to face the window to hide it. I didn't move to comfort her. It wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. Grief rearranges the furniture in a room, and sometimes you have to learn the new layout without bumping into anything. She wiped her face. I'll stay at my sister's for a while, she said. Okay. I'll come by to pick up some things later. Okay. We became a sequence of okays, a chain over a ravine. The afternoons turned into the loneliest part of the day. Mornings had momentum. Evenings had shows and dishes and the rhythmic therapy of cleaning counters that were already clean. Afternoons stretched. The hum of distant traffic sounded like a memory you couldn't quite place. I took long walks. I let the rain touch me on purpose. I sat in a coffee shop and learned the faces of strangers, learned that other people also hold their phones like they weigh as much as a heart. The other man remained a shape at the edge of my vision. I didn't look him up. It wasn't restraint. It was self-preservation. I didn't want to collect details like weapons. I didn't want to memorize his smile in a photo and compare it to mine. I wanted the world to be small enough that I could stand inside it without tipping. One night, near midnight, the intercom buzzed. I hesitated, then pressed the button. It's me, she said, voice thin with cold. I opened the door and waited in the hall. She stepped out of the elevator with a small suitcase, a cardigan over her pajamas, hair loose. She looked like a version of herself that had wandered out of time. We stood there, two people in a hallway that suddenly felt like a stage. I couldn't sleep, she said. I didn't know where else to go. You live here, I said, and the truth of it stung both of us. She nodded, a grateful, broken nod. We didn't touch. Inside, she moved carefully, as if the furniture might break. She poured water and didn't drink it. She sat on the far end of the couch and tucked her feet under herself like she used to. We didn't talk. The quiet was fuller than anything we could have said. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were swollen with the kind of crying that empties out a day. Did you ever think we'd end up here? She asked. I thought of all the versions of us that stood unmade in the margins. I thought of kids we hadn't had, trips we hadn't taken, arguments we didn't have because we were too tired to care. No, I said, but maybe we were always headed somewhere we didn't recognize. We slept in the same bed that night, two islands sharing a blanket. She didn't reach for me, I didn't reach for her. Her breathing, when it came steady, was a sound I wanted to catalog, in case it left again. At dawn, a pale light made a soft bruise of the room. She turned on her side to face me but closed her eyes, as if seeing me would make it real. I watched the shape of her lashes against her cheek. I watched the morning arrive. A phone buzzed on the dresser. Not mine. She didn't move. The sound went silent. Then it came again, persistent, a small mechanical heartbeat. She finally opened her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, and reached past me for the phone. She didn't look at the screen. She put it face down, the way people do when they don't want to know yet. She lay back and stared at the ceiling like there was a constellation just for her. The city outside stretched awake, and in the hush of that early hour, between the second and third vibration of a phone that waited for her attention, she said a sentence that set the day on fire. I told him I can't see him anymore. She made coffee that morning like it was a ritual that might absolve us. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and bitter, cutting through the damp from last night's rain. She moved slower than usual, as if each gesture might be interpreted, as if the air itself took notes. I sat at the table with the mug that still said, maybe later, the crack in the handle dark against my fingers. She slid my mug toward me and stood on the other side, hands gripping the back of a chair she didn't sit in. I told him I can't do this, she said, eyes on the steam. I said I was sorry for how I handled it. I said I still have this. She lifted her hand in a circle that tried and failed to encompass the apartment, the years, the wreckage. He was kind, too kind. You don't owe me this, I said. You don't owe me anything, actually. It came out calmer than I felt. She flinched like I'd dismissed her, then caught herself, nodded. I owe you honesty, she said. At least that. Honesty turned out to be less about facts and more about posture. She didn't recount every moment. She didn't draw a map of how desire had wandered away from us and found a new country. She spoke in edges. Lunches that turned into long afternoons. A joke that became a hand on a sleeve. the way loneliness doesn't always look like emptiness, but can feel like a crowded room where no one says your name. None of it made me feel better. All of it made her human. We tried to live in the same house without pretending we were okay. Dignity became our language. She cooked. I washed. She took the couch for a week. I didn't ask where she was when she wasn't home. She didn't ask how I slept. We existed as neighbors do, polite, present, careful. There were small mercies. She left the last strawberry for me the way she always did. I lined her boots by the door so they wouldn't drip on the mat. On good days, we shared a smile that felt unburdened. On bad ones, the air tightened, and the room seemed to tilt toward a door neither of us opened. The first time she reached for my hand again, it was raining. Of course it was. We were sitting at opposite ends of the couch pretending to watch something, the kind of show you choose when you don't want to invest in anything that might make you feel. The thunder was distant, the kind that rolls in like a memory. She shifted closer, not enough to touch, but enough for the cushion to remember us. Then her fingers found mine, palm to palm, a slow, deliberate interlacing. The warmth of it was familiar and foreign in equal measure. I didn't pull away. I didn't squeeze back. I let our hands be a bridge that didn't promise a destination. "I miss you," she said, so softly I could have pretended I misheard. "I miss who we were," I said, and the sentence sat between us like a careful animal, neither tame nor wild. She nodded, eyes wet, a smile that wasn't happy but grateful. "I know." She rested her head on my shoulder. The room smelled like rain and clean laundry and the faint citrus of her shampoo. For a moment, there was warmth. For a moment, love felt like a quiet room in a storm. Then the show ended, and the credits rolled, and she took her hand back as if reclaiming a part of herself she hadn't decided about yet. Her return wasn't triumphant. It was not a banner day. It was the slow, humble work of showing up. She texted where she was going. She came home when she said she would. She put her phone on the table, face up. I didn't check it. The trust was not resurrected. It was rebuilt in small, chewable pieces. I ate them slowly, careful not to choke. We argued once late, voices low because the hour insisted on reverence. It started with a dish. It turned into a question of who we had been to each other when we stopped trying. "You weren't here," she said, a small explosion of a sentence, "even when you were here." "I was tired," I said. "I was carrying things I didn't know how to name." "So was I," she said, and there was no accusation in it, only a tone of awe at how quietly we had both drowned. We stopped, looked at each other the way people do when they realize they are speaking into their own echo. She stepped closer. I let her. We stood there, not touching, a foot apart, breathing the same air like it was a luxury. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said finally. "I'm asking for a chance to forgive myself near you." The dignity of that unmade me. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, she hadn't moved. I reached up and touched her cheek. She didn't lean into it. She didn't pull away. Tears didn't fall like in movies. Her eyes just glossed, and she blinked more often. "Okay," I said. It was the best I had. Still, there were nights I imagined him. Not his face, but the way he might have made her feel seen. I hated that. I hated that word, seen, as if love is a spotlight you must aim perfectly. I started to notice small things she did to stack the odds for us. A note in my lunch, "Don't forget, the world is kind sometimes." A photo she put back on the shelf of us at the lake, wearing ridiculous hats. A grocery list with ice cream for sad nights at the bottom in a heart that looked embarrassed. I wanted to bask in the gesture without holding it against her for what it was hiding. We decided to go out. Neutral territory, a place that didn't have our history embedded in its chairs. We chose a small restaurant with soft lighting and a window that watched the street. We sat across from each other and ordered dishes we could share. For a while we were good at it, the gentle rhythm of "taste this and you'll like that." We laughed once, an honest laugh that startled us both. Then outside, passing the window, the ghost walked by. Not a ghost, Max, I knew because she knew. Her eyes changed the way windows do when you turn on the light inside. The reflection becomes more vivid than the view. He paused when he saw her. He didn't come in. He didn't wave. He just paused, a hesitation measured in an inhale, then kept walking, blending into the night like it was designed for him. She looked at me, then at the table, then at the door. I swallowed. The room narrowed. I could hear a fork hit a plate 3 tables away. "Do you want to leave?" I asked. She shook her head, a tiny movement. "No," she said. "I want to stay." We stayed. We talked about nothing until it sounded like something. We paid. We walked home in a light drizzle, no umbrellas, letting the rain write its small language on our clothes. Outside our building, she stopped under the awning and looked at me like the street was a confessional. "I didn't know he'd be there," she said. "I know." "I felt something," she said, brutal in her honesty. "Not what you think. Just a tug." "I felt it too," I said before I could edit myself. A tug toward the past. A tug toward the version of me that wanted to walk away before being left. She winced at the word left, then nodded. Inside, we dried off in silence. She changed into a shirt that used to be mine and crawled into bed. She didn't reach for me that night. I didn't turn away. The rain decided to stay, tapping the window with a patience that felt instructional. Sometime after midnight, in the long, soft interval between lightning and thunder, she exhaled a question into the dark that didn't come out as words. "Are we going to make it?" she finally said, voice small. I stared at the ceiling. "Trace the hairline cracks like roads. We're going to be honest," I said. "We're going to be kind. If that's what making it looks like, then yes." She breathed, a shudder of relief or grief, I couldn't tell. She turned then slowly and rested her hand on my chest, not claiming, just locating. There was a moment where sleep almost took us. Then the phone on her side lit up in the dark, a rectangle of unwelcome daybreak. She didn't move, neither did I. The screen dimmed. The room returned to black. In that quiet, we waited for the second light that didn't come, and the absence of it felt like an answer we weren't ready to hear. Morning arrived with the pale, forgiving light that makes even ugly things look tender. The rain had passed. The streets below were washed clean, reflective, a mirror that lied kindly. The city sounded softer, as if the night had scrubbed its voice. I lay still and listened to the apartment breathe around us. She shifted, slow, careful, as if not to scare the day. We made coffee without ceremony. No apologies, no promises. Milk, stirring, the clink of spoon against ceramic. She stood by the sink while I stood by the window, the distance small enough to cross with a single step and vast enough to hold everything we hadn't said. The plant by the sill had perked up overnight, leaves lifted, forgiven again for our neglect. "Look at that," I said. "It always comes back." "Some things do," she said. She placed her cup down with both hands like it might jump. We took a walk because the morning asked us to. The air smelled like petrichor and bread from the bakery on the corner. Couples passed us, dogs tugged their people toward interesting smells. The world persisted in its gentle, indifferent beauty. We didn't hold hands, we didn't avoid it either. We let our arms swing in parallel, like a metronome we could agree on. At the park, the benches were damp but not wet. We sat. A child ran past with a kite that didn't know wind yet. The sky was a soft, undecided gray. She cleared her throat. "When I was with him," she said, and then stopped, reassembled the sentence as if it could be gentler. "When I stepped out of us, I told myself I was searching for something I'd lost. But the thing I lost was not out there." She tapped her chest, as if knocking. "It was here, and I didn't know how to ask you to help me find it." I let the words land where they wanted. I watched a man wipe down a bench with a newspaper and sit carefully, satisfied with his small victory over dampness. "I would have helped," I said. "You know that, or maybe you forgot." She nodded. "I forgot a lot of good things. I remembered all the hard ones." She turned to me, eyes steady, empty of performance. "I don't know how to be the person you deserve right now. I want to be, but wanting and being, there's a distance." There it was, the kindness that hurts. The truth that doesn't ruin you but reveals the ruin. I felt an odd clarity settle, not cold, not cruel, just still. The morning light found the edges of her face and made them soft. I imagined our life continuing. A year of trying, of careful questions, of shared grocery lists and guarded laughter. I imagined it working. I imagined it failing. I imagined a future where we're friends genuinely, where we tell the truth without ceremony. And I imagined a future where we tried so hard to hold on that we strangled the good left between us. "I love you," I said, the simplest sentence, the hardest to carry correctly. "I don't want you to stay because you broke something and feel bad about it. I don't want to stay because I'm afraid of the space where you aren't." She closed her eyes, one tear escaping, not dramatic, a single line of salt and light. "I love you," she said back, without the tightness of expectation. "I don't want you to forgive me into a smaller version of you." A bird landed near our feet, decisive, and then flew away, even more so. We walked home slower. The city had opinions again, horns, voices, a bus sighing at a stop. In the apartment, she went to the bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. The sound of a zipper is more profound at 11 a.m. than at midnight. It's less theatrical. It announces a choice made in daylight. I sat on the end of the bed while she folded clothes with reverence, touching each one as if blessing it. She placed the framed photo from the lake in the middle of the suitcase, then took it out, then placed it back on the dresser, facing the window. "That one stays," she said. "It belongs here." We didn't narrate, we didn't list. We let the room tell us what mattered. A sweater of mine she'd stolen years ago. "Keep it," I said. She smiled. A book with her notes in the margins, arrows pointing at sentences she loved. "Take it," I said. She nodded. The ring came last. She held it between thumb and forefinger and looked at it like it was a tiny spaceship from a future we didn't live in. "Do you want?" "No," I said gently. "Hold on to it. Decide later." There were no grand gestures, no last kisses that turned the clock back. She wheeled the suitcase to the door, paused. The apartment looked bigger again, light filling corners it had neglected. She turned and stepped toward me. We stood close enough to know how the other breathed when trying not to cry. She placed her hand on my cheek, warm, familiar. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me a villain." "Thank you," I said, "for telling the truth when it mattered." She nodded. She looked at the plant. "Water it," she said, a small smile. "It likes to be reminded." "I know," I said. "Mine too." She left without looking back, a kindness to both of us. The door clicked shut, quiet, final, without being brutal. The apartment sounded different without her body inside it. I stood there and listened to the hum of the fridge, the soft arterial pulse of the building, the city beyond, and my own heart, confused but steady. Days rearranged themselves. Morning light came in like an old friend who knows to take off their shoes. The rain returned and left by turns, predictable in its unpredictability. I slept unevenly, then better. I ate alone at the table, not empty anymore, just singular. I took walks. I sent messages to friends I'd neglected. I found the map of the city in the closet and pinned a new dot at the park bench that held a conversation shaped like mercy. Her texts were brief, clean, "Made it okay. Thinking of you. Do you need anything?" I answered in the same measure. No late-night confessions, no tests, just two people who had loved each other well enough not to destroy the bridge between their islands. One morning, weeks later, the plant flowered. I didn't know it could. A small white bloom, almost shy. I took a photo and stared at it longer than a plant deserves. The world, it turns out, is full of things that return their own version of beauty after surviving the neglect you didn't mean to give them. I placed the photo in the frame she'd left on the dresser, temporarily, as a joke the room, and I understood. I made coffee. The steam rose, soft, made of nothing but water and heat and the right timing. The chair across from me was empty, not as an accusation but as a statement. I thought of her, of Max, somewhere being decent or not, of the restaurant, the map, the rain, of the receipt still in the drawer, probably, edges softened by time. I opened the window. The city's morning hum poured in, familiar and large. I breathed it in, let it fill the space she'd left, not to replace her, but to remind me that life continues in 1,000 directions you can't plot. Forgiveness didn't arrive with fanfare. It wasn't a moment. It was a series of small decisions made in daylight. I forgave her for being human. I forgave myself for building a version of love that had no room for our fatigue. I forgave the city for holding a million temptations. I forgave the chair for being empty. And then I sat in it, just to see the room from the other side. The kettle clicked off. I poured another cup I didn't need, just to warm my hands. Morning light pooled on the floor like a new country. It asked nothing. It offered itself the way light does, without agenda. I stood in it and let it touch my face. A message buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. A simple line. "Thank you for being kind to her. M." I stared at it, and instead of anger, felt the subtle ease of a knot loosening. I deleted the message, not as an erasure, but as a way to make space. There was no dramatic ending, just a day that began and kept going. The plant tilted toward the window. The city exhaled. I set the second mug across from me anyway, let the steam rise into the morning, and said her name out loud softly as a blessing and as a goodbye. And in the quiet after, with the hum of distant traffic like a lullaby, the apartment finally felt like it belonged to the present again. The apartment finally felt like it belonged to the present again.